Marcus Hall was invisible by design. By day, he parked cars at a luxury hotel in Dallas. By night, he hunted unsuspecting bank customers with the patience of a predator. Alongside him were Quentin, a desperate former rideshare driver, and Tasha, a bank-savvy insider who could spot a high-value target from across the room. Together, they orchestrated a wave of silent robberies across state lines, never breaking in, never firing a shot, and never leaving a trace. This is the chilling rise of America's most elusive crime trend: bank-jugging. In early 2023, a disturbing trend began to emerge in the otherwise calm suburbs of Austin, Texas. It started with isolated incidents, random victims reporting being followed after visiting their local banks, later ambushed in parking lots or even their own driveways. The attackers didn't use weapons, didn't force entry, and didn't leave much behind. It was as if they simply appeared at the worst possible moment, took what they wanted, and vanished. The victims were left shaken, confused, and unable to explain how someone knew they had just taken out large sums of money. At first, local law enforcement treated the cases as isolated robberies. There were no fingerprints, no clear footage, and no witnesses who could identify the suspects. The lack of evidence frustrated investigators. It wasn't until the third incident in the same month, where an elderly man was robbed of $12,000 just minutes after leaving his credit union, that a pattern began to surface. Each victim had just completed a significant bank transaction, usually involving cash withdrawals. None of them noticed anything suspicious while inside the bank or immediately afterward. But someone had been watching, someone patient, calculating, and invisible. Detectives began to suspect a method that few had even heard of outside of law enforcement circles: bank-jugging. The term referred to criminals who camp outside banks and observe customers, identifying targets based on visible cash envelopes or money bags. Once marked, the victims are followed until they stop somewhere: gas stations, grocery store parking lots, or their homes, and then they're robbed. Sometimes the thieves break into cars when victims go inside stores. Other times, they confront them face to face. The key to the crime is surveillance and timing, not violence. What made bank-jugging especially sinister was its simplicity. It didn't require high-tech tools or armed force. All it took was patience and a reliable vehicle. In many cases, the criminals used stolen or dealer license plates to avoid detection. They sat for hours outside banks, scanning customers as they exited. If someone looked like they were carrying cash, they were silently followed. In most cases, the victims had no idea they were being tracked until it was too late. Fear began to spread as more cases surfaced, not just in Austin, but in nearby towns and cities. Social media lit up with stories and warnings. Residents posted blurry images of suspicious cars idling near banks. Some banks started issuing verbal warnings to customers making large withdrawals, urging them to be cautious. But the attackers always seemed one step ahead, choosing new banks, new neighborhoods, and changing vehicles constantly. While the public panicked, one man in particular was thriving in the shadows. His name hadn't yet surfaced, but his methods were spreading across state lines. He studied people the way a hunter studies prey. He knew how long it took to reach a driveway from a bank, how far people traveled before stopping, and how rarely they looked in their mirrors. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a student of human behavior, and he was only just getting started. Marcus Hall blended in with everyone else. He was the kind of man who never drew suspicion. Neatly dressed, mild-mannered, always polite. By day, he worked as a valet supervisor at a high-end hotel in downtown Dallas, holding doors open for businessmen and carrying luggage for tourists. But when the sun went down, Marcus shifted into a version of himself no one knew existed. He became invisible, watching, planning, stalking. Marcus didn't need to force his way into homes or businesses. His crime required patience, not confrontation. Each morning, he would study maps of bank locations across Dallas-Fort Worth, picking out branches in busy areas with lots of foot traffic and easy escape routes. Then he'd swap out his car's plates with the stolen dealer tag and park near the selected bank before it opened. His process was methodical. He watched dozens of people walk in and out. Most left empty-handed. Others had obvious signs: bright white envelopes, cash pouches, or zipped folders clutched tightly. Marcus noted their behavior. Nervous glances, tense body language. He waited for the ones who looked like they were handling something important. The real targets were never loud or flashy. They were cautious, often middle-aged or older, usually alone. They had no idea someone was marking their every move. When a promising target emerged, Marcus followed them at a safe distance. He never got too close, and always changed lanes frequently to avoid suspicion. He kept his face down and wore sunglasses and a surgical mask, blending in like any other driver. Once the victim stopped at a gas station, restaurant, or retail store, he moved in. If they left the cash in the car, he smashed the window and was gone in under 30 seconds. If they kept it on them, he waited for a vulnerable moment and snatched it directly. He never spoke, never left a trace. The money went straight into a locked duffel bag hidden beneath the floorboards of his garage. He didn't spend it lavishly. Instead, he invested in tools: a second phone with no SIM card for scanning police radio chatter, interchangeable license plates, blackout window tint, and even portable radios to intercept nearby security chatter. Marcus wasn't just committing theft, he was building a system. What made him especially dangerous was that he operated alone. Most juggers worked in teams, with one person watching, another following, and a third striking. But Marcus didn't trust anyone. He believed the fewer people involved, the fewer risks. It worked in his favor. He left no witnesses, never talked on the phone, and didn't even tell his closest friends how he made his money. By the time local law enforcement in Dallas began connecting the dots, Marcus had already struck over 20 times. His victims were unrelated, scattered across counties, and hesitant to report large amounts of stolen cash due to privacy or fear. Each case remained a mystery. The city had no clue that the quiet man in the hotel uniform was running one of the most elusive solo jugging operations in Texas. As the months passed, Marcus Hall's tactics began to spread beyond Dallas. Stories from victims in other cities began surfacing: nearly identical robberies with the same eerie setup. Someone leaves a bank with a large amount of cash, only to be robbed shortly after in a public place. The similarities were undeniable, yet none of the new cases were linked directly to Marcus. That's because he wasn't in those cities, not yet. In Atlanta, a trio of young men began pulling off near-perfect jugging robberies. They operated from rental cars and used walkie-talkies instead of phones to avoid digital tracking. Unlike Marcus, they didn't mind making a scene. Their approach was more aggressive. They'd smash windows in broad daylight, shove victims to the ground, and flee in high-speed getaways. Local news picked up the stories quickly. Police urged banks to post warnings, but the attackers kept adapting.
In Phoenix, a woman in her 60s was followed home from her credit union and robbed in her driveway. The suspects never exited the vehicle. Instead, they had placed a GPS tracker under her car while she was inside the bank. They waited until she parked, then moved in and forced open the trunk before speeding off with over $30,000 in cash. Police were stunned by the sophistication. What had once been a rare, low-profile crime had now grown into a tech-enhanced operation with layers of planning. You didn't have to sit for hours outside banks anymore. Quentin handled the following. Tasha picked the targets, and Marcus executed the final step. In the middle of a humid July afternoon in Houston, Marcus Hall followed a woman who had just made a large cash withdrawal from her bank. She turned into a residential neighborhood, unaware she was being watched. Marcus waited a few minutes, scanning the area for cameras or witnesses. Satisfied, he moved in. As she popped open her trunk and reached for her grocery bags. From there, they uncovered traffic camera images and toll booth records that placed the car at various bank locations across Houston, Dallas, and even as far as Oklahoma City. And a hand-drawn map of Texas highlighting bank clusters, police precincts, and escape routes. By the time police arrived at his last known address, the apartment was wiped clean. No prints, no electronics, nothing personal. Just an empty closet and a single roll of black window tint left behind. A woman withdrawing funds for her daughter's wedding was followed from a downtown bank to a florist on the edge of town. When she came back to her car, the cash was gone. The window was intact. The lock showed no sign of forced entry. Investigators believed the thief had used a universal key fob device, something rarely seen outside organized rings. Got it at a second case followed days later, then a third. By the end of the month, local police realized they had a serial pattern on their hands. It was the final message from a man who had spent years staying just one step ahead. There was even a whiteboard listing recent withdrawals from specific bank locations, all matched with dates and amounts. Isolated incidents popped up across the South Memphis, Nashville, Birmingham. Each time the setup was eerily familiar. Victims followed from banks, robberies executed with surgical precision. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no trace. Law enforcement wasn't sure whether it was Marcus or simply new criminals copying his methods. Either way, the fear remained. It was the operational center of a crime network, and it all pointed back to Marcus. Finally, they caught a break. A partial VIN number from a parking garage camera led them to a storage unit rented under a fake name, but with Marcus Hall's real photo on the surveillance footage entering the building. Marcus stepped out, opened the passenger door, and snatched the tote from the seat. He was back in the driver's seat within seconds. Another clean job, or so he thought. She had parked near the front, glanced around cautiously, and tucked the envelope inside a cloth tote bag. The drone, equipped with facial recognition and high-definition recording, hovered silently as Marcus approached. Analysts recognized the silver sedan immediately. It had been reported near multiple robbery scenes over the past 6 months. But until now, there had been no solid evidence linking it to a suspect. It captured the robbery from a clear angle, his face partially exposed. The stolen tote in hand, and his car's unique bumper sticker, a detail he had overlooked during his preparations. She looked like someone who had done this before, careful, measured, alert. But Marcus had done this too many times. He knew even the most cautious people eventually let their guard down. They worked like clockwork, never staying in one part of the city for too long. While law enforcement scrambled to understand the full scale of the problem, Marcus made a quiet move to Houston. He realized the game was changing. The victims were often too shaken to provide details. Security footage only showed partial views or blurry figures in hoodies. The rise of jugging had become a multi-city epidemic, and no one realized that its most skilled architect had just gone from solo act to mastermind. The rise of copycats, some sloppy, some skilled, increased police attention. Marcus saw in him a useful combination of desperation and street savvy. The second was a woman named Tasha, who worked in a check-cashing business and knew how to read people. She could identify targets from across the room, people withdrawing cash for rent, payroll, or family emergencies. She didn't need to follow anyone. She just had to text Marcus a license plate and description. News segments, warning posters in banks, and community alerts all made things more difficult for someone who relied on invisibility. So Marcus did something he'd never done before. He recruited. His first recruit was a former rideshare driver named Quentin, who had been arrested twice for petty theft, but never convicted. With this new system, Marcus became even harder to trace. Meanwhile, police were stuck chasing shadows. They had no physical evidence, no direct link between the crimes, and no suspects. It was a mistake so small, it almost went unnoticed. He tailed her for several miles, keeping a 2-car buffer between them. What Marcus didn't know was that across the street, a tech enthusiast had recently installed a home security drone that activated whenever it detected motion. The footage was turned over to local police within hours and quickly sent up the chain to a special task force, investigating a recent surge in jugging crimes. Investigators traced the vehicle to a stolen plate registered out of San Antonio. That plate had been reported missing from a dealership 2 months earlier. Inside the storage unit, they found license plates from 4 different states, burner phones, disguises. Tasha and Quentin were arrested within 72 hours. Their homes were raided, and digital evidence connected them to multiple robberies. But Marcus had already vanished. 6 months passed without a single confirmed sighting of Marcus Hall. The jugging cases slowed in Texas, but didn't stop. Then, in Charlotte, North Carolina, the pattern returned with chilling clarity. A woman withdrawing funds for her daughter's wedding was followed from a downtown bank to a florist on the edge of town. A silver sedan was parked for nearly 2 hours without moving. It had heavily tinted windows and no front license plate. The image wasn't clear enough to see the driver, but analysts froze the frame and enhanced the shot. The car had a tiny dent above the rear wheel arch identical to a vehicle spotted in Texas months earlier. A landlord cleaning out an unpaid storage unit found dozens of maps, notes, and printed satellite images. The jugging cases have since been reported in over a dozen states. Marcus has become more than a criminal, he's become a blueprint. And the most disturbing possibility remains unanswered. How many more like him are already out there? Waiting, watching, ready to follow the next unsuspecting bank customer home? Each was marked with dots, dates, and dollar amounts. There were disguised as wigs, contact lenses, fake beards, long-side burner phones, and a journal with coded entries. One of the maps focused entirely on North Carolina and Virginia, suggesting expansion plans. It was a base of operations hidden in plain sight. When she came back to her car, the cash was gone.
The window was intact. The lock showed no sign of forced entry.
A federal task force pulled files from Texas, Georgia, and Arizona to cross-reference techniques. They hoped Marcus might slip up, but he never struck the same bank twice. He moved like smoke wick, silent, untraceable. Every time a robbery occurred, by the time investigators reviewed the footage, the car was already abandoned somewhere else or scrubbed clean. When they discovered something buried deep in the evidence logs, a glove recovered from the Houston storage unit, thought to be insignificant, had recently been matched through DNA analysis. It belonged to Marcus Hall. It was the first physical evidence directly linking him to the string of crimes. Investigators believed the thief had used a universal key fob device, something rarely seen outside organized rings. A second case followed days later, then a third. By the end of the month, local police realized they had a serial pattern on their hands. They found a lead when reviewing footage from a hotel security camera across the street from the bank in the first case. The case escalated. Charlotte police increased surveillance at local banks, deploying undercover vehicles and unmarked patrols. Then came the discovery that sent chills through the department. But there was no sign of Marcus himself. Authorities now believe he's still active, perhaps even training new recruits in smaller towns where surveillance is weaker. The jugging cases have since been reported in over a dozen states. Marcus has become more than a criminal, he's become a blueprint. And the most disturbing possibility remains unanswered. How many more like him are already out there? Waiting, watching, ready to follow the next unsuspecting bank customer home?